Alright, let's do this. Hello, you beautiful people. Me again. Another beautiful day. Yeah, what? Look, so, Square Enix got their hands full, right? Okay. Alright. So, they're working on Final Fantasy VII, the remake, part 2. You Final Fantasy fans are gonna love this news. Listen to this. Final Fantasy X-3. Ready for it? Listen to this. Says here, Final Fantasy X-3 could still happen. Recent comments from Final Fantasy X developer indicates that there is a slim possibility of a threequel, not nyquel, excuse me, being made someday. Says here, the Final Fantasy franchise has always had a strange relationship with direct sequels and multiple universes. Final Fantasy X and XIII both received sequels, among others, with the latter also gaining a threequel. Final Fantasy XV received a ton of DLC to fill the hole of its story before their cancellation. While the universe around Final Fantasy VII is large, now Square Enix is focused on expanding that universe even further with Final Fantasy VII Remake, and Final Fantasy XVI is also in development. That's good news for fans of the franchise, as the next few years since filled with content, but it's possible that more will come along too. Indeed, based on recent comments, Final Fantasy X getting its own threequel is not out of the question. Says here, Final Fantasy X characters designer slash developer Tetsuya Nomura and designer writer Matsuno Toriyama recently discussed the possibility of Final Fantasy X-3 in an interview with Famitsu, which was then picked up by Japanese site and Western media. According to Nomura, the chances of Final Fantasy X-3 happening is not zero. He did go on to say, if we are to make X-3, we somehow have a synopsis written by Nojima-san. It's sleeping right now, but the plot itself does exist. Happy, joy for the Final Fantasy fans. Anyway, in other words, the story and outline for the game does exist in an official capacity, but it is not in any sort of active development, much like an outline exists for The Last of Us 3, but nothing is proceeding with it. Fans are kept waiting to see what actually come of it, if anything. The possibility of another entry in the sub-franchise is likely existing for many fans of Titus and Yuna love story. Anyway, it doesn't really end there though, as not only the possibility of it happening was discussed, but on the off chance that it did, there was even a small timetable established. Toriyama explained, we are not in a phase where we can talk about it unless we have finished producing Final Fantasy VII Remake. Yeah, because Final Fantasy VII Remake is a big project. But anyway, it says here, as such, if Final Fantasy X-3 were to come, it would be several years away. Probably PlayStation 6. Final Fantasy VII Remake is an ambitious project with all eyes on multiple events and characters as Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 amps up. But Part 2 probably won't be the last part. This means that it's years away from being done. PlayStation 6 anyway, and that the slim chance of Final Fantasy X-3 happening is even further away. As aforementioned, the franchise has always had a strange relationship with the notion of direct sequels. Getting another Final Fantasy X game more than 20 years after its last sequel would perhaps be the strangest, but even among titans like Final Fantasy VII Remake and new upstart like Final Fantasy XVI, it's possible to say it wouldn't be welcomed. Yeah, I think they should have as far as X-3 goes, you know, when it comes to sequels to RPGs, it's good that you follow through. It's good that you follow through on it versus delaying, because right now you got Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 to work on, right? And that's a big project within itself. Then you got 16 to deal with. Then there's the Final Fantasy Online to deal with. And now you want to talk about a X-3? That's like years away right now for a X-3 to even like come to the forefront or to the surface. But the story and the story does exist, and the outline does exist, you know. So the question, it's only a matter of time before these Square Enix developers decide to get around to it and start working on it. Because right now they got their hands full with Final Fantasy Online, 16, and Final Fantasy VII Part 2, the remake, to deal with, you know. And then on top of that, they're supposed to be bringing Final Fantasy 13 1 and 2 to, I think, Game Pass, plus 7 the remake. So X-3, you know, it's like years away, you know. But if they have time, they probably will work on it, you know. But there is hope. So keep your fingers crossed. But these RPG projects that Square Enix work on, they're huge, and they're no walk in the park, man, you know. So, and they got to put the time and investment in it, you know. I mean, if you've been following Square Enix, I mean Squaresoft, since Nintendo days, and if you were really following Squaresoft since PlayStation 1 days, you know how good their RPGs are, because they flooded the PlayStation 1 with RPGs. They flooded the PlayStation 2 with RPGs. And then they formed Square Enix. They flooded the PlayStation 3 with RPGs, and then PlayStation 4 wasn't exempt from Square Enix RPGs. And now we're in PlayStation 5. So the RPG projects that they take on, they're huge and they're big, you know. I mean, look at 15. Look how many updates they came out with, you know. And the updates ain't gonna stop anytime soon. And Square Enix is they're very Squaresoft, now known as, first it was Squaresoft by themselves, then it was Enix, then they merged, now they're Square Enix. So they got their hands full. And then you're talking about, they also got Dragon Quest to deal with, and Dragon Quest Builder. So they got their hands full with all these RPGs that they're working on, you know. So X-3, if they got some time to work, if they find time to work on it, it will happen. But right now, gotta keep your fingers crossed. You know, I mean, there's enough. I'm hoping that they make a 12-2. You know, they should have made a 12-2, but who knows? Anything is possible with Square Enix right now. They might even make a what's that? A Final Fantasy versus Chrono Trigger. You never know. You know what I'm saying? Anything's possible in in the RPG world. So only time will tell. But right now, X-3. Only time will tell. Anyway, I'm gonna leave a link in the description box with this video so y'all can enjoy it. Nice talking to you people again. Chris, still a Star Wars and Star Trek thing, or dark side. I'm gone. Peace.